Hey guys, Stealth here and welcome to the US 3rd Armored. This battle group is all about the M1A1s. Backed up, of course, by Apaches, all sorts of fire support vehicles, and pretty good infantry. So, let's have a look at what's in this battle group. Alright, so what is the 3rd Armored Division all about? Well, it's kind of there in the title, tanks. You get a massive amount of activation points for tanks. Cheap ones as well. It's all ones. Until you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards for 1 point each. It's really cheap, so let's make use of it. The way that I would build up the tank tab, and I'm starting with this because it's essentially the core of the battle group, and keep in mind I'm building this thing for, let's say, larger games, 2v2, 4v4, and 10v10. I generally like to have my command units at the start of the bar. This means I always have my command units first. It's basically a tradition, if you will, or a common habit, keeping it from wargame. I can only have one of these, making it a question, do I want them? Arguably, yes. You can get the M1A1 as opposed to the HA. Now, if you compare these, you're going to find that the armor, especially frontal armor, is going to be substantially more on the HA. It's 20 instead of 17, which means your survivability goes up substantially, and in case of a 10v10, potentially a, let's say, more tactically oriented 10v10, where you don't really have the luxury of losing a heavy command tank, such as the M1A1, sorry, the M1A1 Abrams, so this guy, I want to have every little bit of survivability. I want to make sure I can contest the zone, I want to stay there as long as I possibly can, and the M1A1HA does that for me. Depending on your playstyle, you can also get the M1A1CP. Don't upvet them, you don't need to, you just need the numbers, because these guys, these 3 tanks are going to bolster the effectiveness of the rest of the tanks. So the M1A1HA, you get a bunch of these cards. I think, arguably, you get a few too many, depending on how you play. I think you don't need to have all of these at lower rank, i.e. you just get 12 of them. I think that's a bit much. I want to get them at higher veterancy. The reason is that with this they get 65% accuracy, as opposed to 60% I think it is. You get a better chance to hit, better rate of fire. More importantly, you get better stress resistance. Over here they get normal, you get 25%. And if these guys stick close to one of their leaders, that's the command unit, they're going to get buffed to the highest. Which means the chance to hit increases and you get more stress resistance and you recover stress a lot faster. So your unit is going to be more effective overall. Do you need all of them? It's going to come down to your playstyle. If you're very good at keeping these things alive, you might also want to bring in a couple of M1A1s. Because they're 100 points cheaper and their firepower isn't that much less. So you could make the case for, let's say, bringing 6 of these, and then bringing 2 cards of the M1A1. My battle group would then look like this. I bring either the HA or an M1A1CP, so a command unit, 1 of the HA Abrams, and let's say 2 or 3 of the M1A1s, depending on my budget at said time. This is going to allow me a lot of firepower, for basically a lot less money, a lot less points than the M1A1HA. Oh, sorry, they're 75 points cheaper, not 100. I was looking at the command tank. These guys, when it comes to firepower, you're looking at 19 as opposed to 21, and you will feel that difference, to be sure. But if you have something like an enemy super heavy, let's say T80UD, you could also mix these things in. The M901A3 ITV. These guys pack 25 AP, and can be fired from a bit farther behind your group. So these guys soak up your damage, these guys dish out damage against infantry, against fighting vehicles, and these are the ones that actually kill the enemy armor. Now, much like the M1A1 and the M1A1HA, you don't strictly need to have them at the highest veterancy. I would go middle, because ideally they would still be under the influence of the M1A1CPs, allowing you to get the highest veterancy and such 71% accuracy on these things. 25 AP is enough to cut through any tank and will really hurt heavy tanks on the Soviet side as well. The last one I would want is the M728 CEV Combat Engineering Vehicle, Combat Engineers Vehicle. You get 6 of them, you get 4 of them, or you just get the 2 of them. I would get 4, and their core objective is to support the Abrams in getting rid of enemy infantry. These guys with 3.2 HE and a good range will get into ATGM range, at least like an ATGM team, but beyond that they should be able to stay outside of ATGM range of units or anti-tank weapon range and just blow them apart with a 165mm weapon. They're surprisingly accurate at 62%, they're not terribly survivable, so don't push with these. You push with your M1s and your HAs, and these guys are for fire support. Now with this I have tools for every job. I have tools if I need to take down enemy heavy armor or soak up damage. I have, let's say, fire support tanks. These are basically the grunts of the army. These bring most of the firepower, but they cannot do everything. These are specialists at killing enemy heavy armor, and these kill the infantry. Keeping everything supplied is going to be interesting, because the Abrams does have, well, it tends to have some ability issues. Your autonomy on these tanks is not fantastic. So what you want is something that can very quickly resupply you. The problem is, not everything is as quick off-road, which is most likely where your tanks will be most of the time. So the M113A2 supply is only doing 59 kilometers off-road. These guys are doing 54, and they don't have any armor. The Hemmet has 90 kph off-road, very, very quick supply vehicle, but you only get 2. Which means that with your logistics slots, you would need more of them. Ideally, I would say go with the M113A2 for a couple of reasons. It has an okay amount of mix between speed and supply, and it has some armor. So if a fighting vehicle gets close to it and starts shooting at it, you have some chance of survival before it goes down. The M35s will go down very quickly, and the Hemmets are just not numerous enough. I don't want to have just to rely on 2 of these. If I lose one, I lose 50%. If I lose one of these, I only lose 10% of my supply vehicles. You can also bring an UH-60A. Very useful if you want to quickly resupply a more forward group. And these, in tandem with one of the M113s, can also work together. So this guy is basically a bit farther behind your lines. This guy runs up to the tanks, drops off ammo, fuel, repairs, goes back to the UH-60, gets filled up again, and the cycle repeats. The UH-60 at some point is going to be depleted. If you're going to be playing in a larger team game, somebody might have a field supply point, but I would leave that up to a player who actually has, let's say, more numerous or cheaper logistics points than you do. As for command vehicles here, a MUT is always handy to have. These guys, oh sorry, I forgot the UH-60. These guys very useful to have, nice and quick, not very expensive, and far more mobile than the other tracked counterparts, the M77 and the Bradley. Now, seeing as in WARNO you don't have to keep a command vehicle inside of a zone unless it's being counter-capped, you can dash into a sector with these guys and dash out. And keep in mind, you already have 3 command vehicles here, so arguably you don't need a ton of command vehicles. Would I bring a field supply point in this particular battle group? Probably not. Simply because they're very expensive at 250 points, and the way I have it set up now, they're going to take up 3 activation points. It also means that you're going to have some logistics vehicle run all the way back to the base, to the base of the map, your spawn zone essentially, in order to get supplies. If you're playing in a 10v10, you can usually borrow some supplies from somebody else. I would not bring a fob in this deck. Infantry. We get 3 fairly cheap slots, and then it starts to add up very, very quickly. So pick wisely. Now, the job for the infantry, in this case, is mostly to take towns that tanks are best not going into. This means that, arguably, at least that's my consideration, you don't need as much anti-tank capability. I'm not saying you don't need any, but you don't need as much. Because in case you're dealing with enemy armor, well, you got your tanks, you got your ITVs, you potentially have air tab and holo tab, so we're going to get to that later. You don't need as much. The military police with their M67 are always useful, but if I want to clear a town quickly, I'm going to use either the engineers with the flash or the base engineers with their satchel charges. Up to you which one you prefer. If you want to have a bit more range, then the incendiary rocket launcher from the engineers with the flash is going to come in handy. Otherwise, very close range warfare will be waged with the base engineers. I would bring them in the M113A3, to make sure I also get a heavy machine gun on the scene, which can suppress enemy infantry. If you want to get them very fast, or faster, I mean road speed is 100 versus road speed 79, you can go with the M35s. I don't really care for that, I just want these guys to get there in the first place, so I'm going to bring the engineers. As for the rest, engineers with the Dragon could be useful to side shots, but the range is somewhat limited. So I would more usefully bring a TOW 2 launcher. Now, why do you need TOW 2s or ITOs if you so desire on an enemy or on a battle group that has armor? I want to create side shot situations. So you have a couple of TOW launchers inside of a town, and I have my tanks ideally coming from a slightly different vector, so that the enemy armor is going to be forced to pick. Let's say that this is enemy armor. My tank is, let's say, to the front of it, so potentially at that gate. My TOW tune is somewhere over here. This vehicle, being a tank, is going to have to pick. Do I want to show my frontal armor to that tank over there, or to the TOW team over here? If it shows the frontal armor there, it's going to expose the side armor, allowing the tank to get the kill. If I expose my frontal armor, or if I show my frontal armor there, I expose my side armor to the TOW team, and thus die anyway. So that's my argumentation for having TOW launchers. The availability for these guys is somewhat limited. I would probably pick the ITO, because it does enough, and I get more availability. If I want to make sure that these guys get a bit more accuracy, you can upvat them, but you only get 4. For my purposes, I think the base ITO is enough. Because I'm going to try and side shot things, or just force a side shot with my tanks. What else do you need? Mech rifles can be very handy. Ideally, I want something that provides me with a Bradley. The M2A2, fairly expensive at 65 points, but it also comes with a TOW launcher. And this means that I'm going to have both an infantry group and a TOW launcher. Which means a fire team with a Law is going to be doing some battle against the enemy. But the Bradley is going to be providing fire support to said infantry, as well as throw missiles at the enemy. Now, the Bradley is far more expensive than the Humvee. Yes, it's also far more survivable, and I would say far more cost efficient than the Humvee. The Humvee doesn't do anything for you, so it's most likely, depending on your settings, just going to drive off. The Bradley is going to stay there, throw missiles, fire with its Bushmaster, and use the M240 to suppress enemy infantry. So I want to have at least one card of these, and I'm not really getting them for the infantry, I'm mostly getting them for the Bradley. Do you want them upfetted? Not really. Yes, that's going to boost your accuracy to 68%, but 65 to 68 and sacrificing 3 units, no thank you. I'll take the higher, the higher availability. Heavy machine guns can be useful. Ideally, what these guys do is keep people out of your town. So a tank is going to sit, let's say, on the edge of a tree line, protecting the town, taking down enemy transports, and that's its primary job, take down transports. The infantry inside the town, in the form of these guys or the 762, whichever you prefer, is going to do the actual killing. These guys are going to take out the infantry while the tank takes out the transport. So I would want to have a couple of these. I don't strictly care about their accuracy, I just care about their suppression. You can get a few less of them. Does it help your accuracy? Yeah, by a whole 1%, so no thank you. I'm going to take the lower veterancy, I'll just have the availability. Do you need anything else? Depends on your playstyle. If you want to have something that can do a bit more of a dash action, or present an enemy threat, or a threat to enemy behind enemy lines, something like the arrow rifles with their Blackhawk can be very useful, but keep in mind your activation points are going to go pretty quick. Mech rifles, pretty useful guy, a pretty useful group. You got the Dragon 2 with 18 pen, 1575 meter range, and they carry 3 light support weapons. That's quite a bit of suppression, and seeing as they're an 11-man squad, they can definitely deal out a lot of damage. They can take a beating, and in tandem with your engineers, they should be able to clear a town pretty quick. But again, activation points. I'm going to come back to this later. Artillery. A couple different options. I'm going to bring at least mortars to make sure I can put up a smoke screen. I want to have the ability to throw smoke to both do offensive and defensive actions. Offensive, i.e. I want to have a smoke screen so that my tanks can push forward and duck back into a smoke screen when there are too many HGMs coming. Defensive, i.e. I'm trying to retreat from a position. I want to again break line of sight, and I want to have my mortars be able to do that. Why do I use the M106 over the M30? Mobility. The M106 is mechanized. This thing can drive at 59 kilometers an hour. These guys can move at 9 kilometers an hour. This means that if I happen to have a breakthrough and I'm able to dash into an enemy line, these will keep up. These will walk. I'm still impressed they can walk 9 kilometers an hour with one of these things, just a two-man group, but beyond that, I still very much prefer these. As for the rest of artillery, it's going to be really up to you and also up to whether or not you want to bring a field supply point. Because artillery in the form of the MLRS, whether you use the cluster or the base, it's a very potent weapon and you're going to need a ton of supply for it. These things carry 12 rockets each. They are a heck of a punch. They do a lot of cluster damage. They are also hungry. So it's going to be both, let's say, micromanagement intensive, and it's going to be something that eats up supplies, unless you bring a field supply point. Now, why would you use these? Oops, already. The M270 can hit enemy artillery, can soften up, let's say, town positions for your infantry to move in. With their range of 42 kilometers, they can shoot across the whole map. So you don't really need to get these things too far away from your starting position, and that's why they can stay fairly close to the fob. The cluster, hitting enemy tanks, softening up enemy tanks, and making sure that the enemy armor has already been weakened while yours pushes in and finishes them off. That's why you could use these. The M109A2 is something I would definitely have in this deck, because it serves a different purpose than the M106 mortar. The M109 is going to be there to hit enemy towns, just provide general suppression damage, and hunt down enemy HGM positions. Infantry inside of a tree line with a missile launcher can make your life as an armored deck a bit more complex than it needs to be. And this guy is going to make your life easier. Make sure that you bring one of those in, hotkey them, and turn them to a position that you suspect an HGM is going to be in. You can just use a tank, push forward a bit. If a missile comes out, you shoot back at it with the M109. Recon. Couple different slots. You got a couple of ones, some two, or sorry, just the 1, 2, and a couple of 3s. So we're going to have to pick quite wisely once again. Always have a reconnaissance helicopter in your deck. They're fast, they can fill up gaps pretty quick, and they're just overall very, very useful for intelligence gathering. These things are not exactly defensible. They got only 4 armor, so don't expect them to take too much of a beating. One missile is essentially going to be enough to take these down. If you want to have something like a reconnaissance helicopter that packs a punch in the form of the Hellfire, you can. I think it's a bit much, and I already think I have this capacity. I already have high-end anti-tank weaponry in the form of my tanks, my ITV, and my Bradleys. So I'm going to just pick the Scout. A minigun is fine. I don't need Hydras. These are very situational. Great for hunting down a value target, let's say a high value target. Beyond that, no thanks. I'll just take these. Then, a couple of different options. The Recon Bradley is pretty much a no-brainer. These guys can lock down an open area almost single-handedly. They got their Bushmaster in case infantry moves up. They got their tow launcher in case a tank shows itself. They have very good optics. They got mediocre stealth. They're just very, very, very deadly. So I generally tend to bring one of these. As for the Fist V, it's basically your ITV, which has eyes. It's a reconnaissance vehicle basically to the same effect as this guy. It's just these have normal optics, and you're paying 100 points for them. The Fist V has... Oh, sorry, it does not have a missile launcher. It just looks like it has a missile launcher. Never mind. These things are harmless. They don't look harmless. But it's basically an M113 with reconnaissance. Making them very, very, very cheap. But beyond that, not very useful. The M150 is useful. It does have a missile launcher. It has a tow launcher. Again, good range, decent accuracy. I just want to have a couple of these to present a threat. You never quite know whether that missile that's coming at you from that tree line is a tow, an ITOW, a tow 2, a Milan. You really don't know. But most players are going to go, ooh, crap, missiles, I'm going to pull back. Which is what I want them to do. I want to be able to spot that unit, and as it gets attacked by a missile, it's going to pull back, giving me some time to respond to it with whatever weapon system I see fit. As for reconnaissance infantry, very useful. It's going to come down to what sort of playstyle you have. I would pick scouts over snipers for their availability. The snipers are very useful, yes, absolutely, but you only get 3. With scouts, I can double my amount of reconnaissance very, very quickly, because I get both 9 scouts and I get 9 reconnaissance vehicles. So with these, you can get the ACAV, which fires a recoilless rifle, although it's not very accurate, or you can just get an M151A2, basically a Jeep with a heavy machine gun. That can be very useful. And I'm only paying 25 points for these, so I'm going to slightly up-vet them, and I'm now getting 12 additional reconnaissance vehicles. Now you could make the argument that that makes the M150 redundant, but the M150 with its tow launcher fulfills a different role. It's more of a scout with a deterrent capability. These guys are pure scouts. I would not throw these into a fight. Anti-air. Very few options, and not a lot of activation points on the cheap either. Your base anti-air unit is going to be the Chaparral. You don't have any long-range anti-plane systems, which can be a detriment, but we're going to have to fix that in the air tab. The Chaparral is, however, very capable of dealing with enemy helicopters. Keep in mind, if you're coming from Wargame, this guy carries 4 missiles, no more. It is not the Chaparral from Wargame that you might know that carries 8. You will have to resupply this guy after probably 1 engagement with a helicopter, because their accuracy and their efficacy with HE is not great, especially if you're taking down something armored like an Mi-24. If you're fighting against an Akula, which also has ECM, I've seen these things fire 4 times and miss every single shot, which is very frustrating, but well, that's just what you get with these things. If you up-vet them, does that make it better? Barely. You get a very, very tiny amount of accuracy increase. You don't get any rate of fire increase. I don't really care. So we're going to get these at low veterancy. OH-58CS with a couple of stingers mounted on it. It's a very quick platform, and it can be very useful to deal with enemy helicopters because it is so fast. So I would definitely want to have these, but again, it's going to come down to how you play and how aggressively you want to hunt down enemy helicopters. The Mi-24 VP, for example, would definitely be a valid target for this. And if I take down the VP and lose the OH-58CS while I'm doing it, that would be fine. Because I've taken down a big threat to my main ingredient, my main firepower in the form of the tanks, by using a fairly cheap platform to do it at just 80 points. Pivads and Stingers. Pivads useful for stunning things. They generally don't get the kill, because helicopters will outrange you and aircraft don't stay around you for long enough to actually get killed by it. But they are useful to stun. Stingers, fairly useful because they got a ton of accuracy, so they're very likely to hit with that 5 HE blast. You do get a decent amount of them if you low vet them, so you go to veteran, you're going to get just the 4. I would sprinkle these around the battlefield. So what about the Pivads? We're going to use these? For now, not yet. They do have their own place. They are very useful, but they fulfill a slightly different role. Helos. Interestingly, for an armored division, we get a bunch of helicopter slots. So how am I going to fill these? Well, my main enemy is going to be infantry, because I don't have a lot of said infantry. I have a lot of tanks. So taking down enemy towns is going to be more difficult. And yes, I have 35 infantry units, but I still think they're going to go pretty quick. So something like the Cobra, the base Cobra for 120 points, with a bunch of Hydra rocket pods is going to be very, very useful. I'll take one of these. The Apache is another beast entirely. When I compare these, you're going to see why. The Cobra has 8 strength, the Apache has 10. The Cobra has no ECM, and the Apache does have 20% ECM. So the Apache is more likely to just not get hit. And if it does get hit, it's not that likely to take a metric ton of damage. Also because it has armor, which is something the Cobra does not. So the Apache is just a far more survivable Cobra, if you will. And that's not even doing it justice, because it has the 30mm gun, as opposed to the 20mm gun that the Cobra carries. Does that mean you always need to pick the Apache? Not really. You don't need an electric screwdriver if a base screwdriver can get the job done, because the base screwdriver, the Cobra, is cheaper. If you have the activation points though, and you like these things, then yes, by all means, also bring an Apache rocket, but keep in mind you're only getting one per card. So you're gonna have to make this thing work. And, because they carry rocket pods, they tend to run out fairly quickly. They will probably bring their value to the battlefield, but you need to replenish them. So again, tying into playstyle, if you're going to bring an Apache with rocket pods, I would also bring one of these, because I'm also going to be bringing a fob. It's basically a package deal, so I'm going to have to spend 3 more points here, it means I'll spend 3 more points here, and I'll spend some points here. So you're spending a lot more points just to get the logistics attached to the Apache. So what about the AH-64A base Apache and the HEGM Apache? The HEGM Apache is a purebred helicopter killer, carrying nothing but Hellfires and the M230. Only use this if you absolutely must kill the enemy tank. These things, as opposed to Wargame, are not fire and forget. You do need to keep an eye on the target. You need to make sure that the target is maintained with line of sight. If you don't have that, well, you're gonna be in trouble, because your missile is just going to miss. The base Apache is more of a jack of all trades, much like the Tow Cobra. Again, comparing them side by side, you have the Tow Cobra versus Apache. You got ITOs versus Hellfires. Hellfires hit harder. You got the same amount. No, you got double the amount. Oh, sorry, almost triple the amount of Hydras, and you got the 30mm gun. I'd say the Apache is a massive upgrade over the Tow Cobra, and considering what it brings to the battlefield, I would much prefer this over the Tow Cobra. If you want to bring an Apache, by all means, I would probably either bring another base Apache or another Apache rocket pod. So my setup would probably look more like this. Finally, air tab. What do we have? Quite a lot, actually. And we need to address something right away. Enemy airplanes with cluster bombs or just anti-tank weapons are going to be a problem. In order to address said problem, you would normally bring Eyehawks, but you don't have those. So you're going to have to counter their air power with your air power. Now you have a couple of different options when it comes to dealing with the enemy airplanes, and that's both the F4 Phantom II or the F-15C Eagle. I would pick the Eagle. The Sparrows are good, but the problem for me is the lower survivability and lower speed of the Phantom versus the Eagle. Your missiles are just about as good, but the plane itself is just far better. You are paying a price for that. You're jumping from 195 to 275. But you got 20% ECM to 40% ECM. You gain 400 kilometers an hour in speed. And your travel time is 1 second versus 2 seconds. Your air optics is exceptional, so you're even more likely to detect enemy airplanes. And this means you can just keep these things loitering. You can keep them around for a far longer time, or well, not necessarily far longer time. You're more likely to keep these circling and spot an enemy aircraft or deter the enemy from even sending in an aircraft. To that end, I would probably bring 4 of them, because I am that scared to get bombed to death by cluster bombs or attack planes. An Su-25 you'll probably intercept in time. An Su-22 with cluster bombs, less so. So make sure that if you possibly can, have one of these circling. What is next? Playstyle related. The A-10s are very valuable. The unguided bombs will not do a whole lot to tanks, to armor, but the Avenger will. This weapon is going to kill armor. That's what this plane was designed for, and it does it very well. The A-10 Thunderbolt 2 with the anti-tank weapons, I've found it a bit hit or miss. Yes, they're very potent, but do we need it? And moreover, does it hit? Because I've seen these things just fly in, launch a Maverick, and keep in mind they have a reload of 2.5 seconds, so they fire 1, wait 2.5 seconds, and then they fire again. And at their speed, they might already have lost the target by then or flown over the target. So you're going to have to come around, which means you're going to be staying longer in the enemy airspace. The A10HE, arguably, is more useful. And here's why. I'm going to be able to take out enemy infantry, or at least bomb them, and use the Avenger to threaten enemy helicopters as well as enemy armor. So for this particular setup, I'll bring the A10HE. And then what do we bring? Do we need seed? I'd say not really. You get 5 anti-radar missiles, so it's going to be capable of taking down enemy radar-guided platforms. Do I need to? Is the real question. Do I need to? Yes, I have my 4 fighters, and if you want your fighters to duck into enemy airspace, it's going to be pretty useful to bring a Weasel so you can start clearing out enemy AA positions and be more aggressive with your Eagles, thus keeping the skies clear for your tanks to move up. However, if you're playing in a different way and you keep these guys more, let's say, behind or over your own lines, you might not need a Weasel. You might not need any additional aircraft at all. But there are some tanks that might prove difficult to kill. And in that case, I would probably bring this guy. The F4 Phantom E with cluster bombs, or the F111. The F111 is very, very, very quick. Sorry, no, they're as quick. 1040, 1040, actually it's slower, my bad. Agility is very good. Air optics, normal, but then again, we don't really need that. ECM, slightly better on the F111 at 30% versus 20%. These guys carry more of these cluster bombs. They can carpet bomb a larger area and as such prove to be more useful. This is just going to be an additional tool in my toolkit to deal with enemy armor so that my tanks can reign supreme on the battlefield. So where does that leave us? 42 activation points out of 50. Where you decide to spend the rest is basically up to you. If you want to, you can go with the field supply point, or FOB as I tend to call them, and then get something like the M270 MLRS. Arguably, you could say, you know what, I don't want to use the base MLRS, I'm going to go with the cluster MLRS, and I'm going to sacrifice the plane. Because this way, with the Arty, I'm able to use the supply point and get this thing more ammunition, and at the same time, I will be able to keep my jets safe. So I'm not going to use the additional air power. You could also argue, well, that's going to free up my airspace, or it's going to free up my slots to bring an additional A10. If you really enjoy using these, by all means, why not? You can also then argue, I'm going to use the Weasel to make sure that the other planes can do their jobs a little safer. There are all sorts of considerations that you can use on this group. If you find that you want to do some more sneaky stuff and potentially in tandem with your artillery system, your cluster, spot things using the sniper and kill it with the cluster, you can. You also have that option. It's really, really, really going to come down to your playstyle. So the last couple of points, I'm basically going to leave unattended and leave to you to fill in. Because I don't know how you play. This is basically just how I would play. I'm going to put the deck as it is right now down below in the description. I hope you guys will find it useful and that you will adjust it to your own playstyle. Because again, everybody has their own preferences, everybody has their own way to play. Mine is not yours. If you found it useful, please hit like and let me know down below in the description, in the comments, what you think of this deck, what you think of this battle group, and how you would adjust it for yourself. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon for more.